How Craigslist murdered the $19 billion newspaper industry. In 1995, while newspaper executives were popping champagne corks celebrating record profits from classified advertising revenues that had reached an astronomical $19.4 billion annually, a computer programmer named Craig Newmark was quietly building what would become the most devastating weapon ever deployed against traditional media. Craigslist didn't look like a killer. With its bare-bones design that resembled a relic from the internet's Stone Age, blue hyperlinks scattered across white pages like breadcrumbs, and a user interface that seemed deliberately ugly, it appeared more like an abandoned website than a revolutionary force. But beneath that deceptively simple exterior lurked something newspapers had never encountered in their centuries of dominance, a competitor that could do their most profitable job better, faster, and for free. By the time newspaper executives realized what was happening, Craigslist had already begun systematically dismantling the financial foundation of their entire industry, one classified ad at a time. The classified advertising section had been newspapers' secret goldmine for over a century, generating profit margins that would make Silicon Valley executives weep with envy. These small text advertisements, tucked away in the back pages between sports scores and obituaries, accounted for nearly 40% of total newspaper revenue by the mid-1990s. Want to sell your car? That'll be $50 for a week in the local paper. Looking for an apartment? Another $60, please. Job posting? That could run you several $100s depending on the size and duration. Personal ads, garage sales, lost pets, furniture, electronics. Every aspect of commerce and human connection that required local advertising flowed through newspaper classified sections like tributaries feeding a mighty river of cash. The beauty of classified ads for newspapers was their incredible profit margin. Once the infrastructure existed, adding another small text advertisement cost virtually nothing to produce, yet commanded premium prices because newspapers held a monopoly on reaching local audiences effectively. Major metropolitan newspapers like the New York Times, Los Angeles Times, and Chicago Tribune were pulling in hundreds of millions annually just from these small ads, while smaller regional papers relied on classifieds for their very survival. Craig Newmark's journey toward destroying this empire began innocuously enough in San Francisco's tech scene, where he started sending out email lists about local events to friends and colleagues in 1995. What began as Craigslist, literally just an email newsletter highlighting cool happenings around the Bay Area, gradually evolved as recipients began asking if they could post job openings, apartment listings, and items for sale. Newmark, a soft-spoken programmer who had worked at IBM and other tech companies, possessed neither the ruthless ambition of typical Silicon Valley entrepreneurs nor any master plan to revolutionize media. He simply wanted to help his community connect more effectively, applying the collaborative spirit of early internet culture to solve everyday problems. By 1996, demand had grown enough that Newmark converted his email list into a simple website, maintaining the same philosophy of minimal design and maximum functionality that would become Craigslist's signature. The site expanded organically, with users requesting new categories and cities, while Newmark remained committed to keeping the platform free for most postings and maintaining its non-commercial, community-focused ethos. What made Craigslist absolutely lethal to newspapers wasn't just that it was free, it was that it was better in almost every way that mattered to users. While newspaper classified ads were limited by physical space, forcing advertisers to compress their descriptions into expensive, abbreviated text, Craigslist allowed unlimited description length, multiple photos, and direct email contact between buyers and sellers. Where newspapers required phone calls during business hours, payment processing, and days of delay before ads appeared in print, Craigslist offered instant publication 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. The site's search functionality meant users could find exactly what they wanted instead of scanning through columns of tiny text organized by broad categories. Perhaps most importantly, Craigslist tapped into network effects that newspapers could never match. As more people used the platform, it became exponentially more valuable for everyone else, creating a self-reinforcing cycle of growth that traditional media couldn't compete against. By 1999, Craigslist had expanded beyond San Francisco to 9 other major cities, and the writing was on the wall for anyone paying attention. The newspaper industry's response to this existential threat was a masterclass in corporate denial and strategic incompetence. Rather than recognizing Craigslist as a fundamental disruption requiring immediate, dramatic action, most newspaper executives dismissed it as a fad that would never scale or generate serious revenue. They pointed to Craigslist's deliberately amateur appearance as evidence that consumers wouldn't abandon the trusted, professional classified sections they'd relied on for decades. When newspapers finally acknowledged the threat, their attempts at digital classified advertising were hamstrung by legacy thinking and profit protection instincts. They tried to charge similar prices to their print ads, maintained complicated submission processes, and failed to create the seamless user experience that made Craigslist addictive. Industry efforts like CareerBuilder and Apartments.com required massive venture capital investments and complex business models, while Craigslist operated with fewer than 30 employees and kept expenses so low that even minimal revenue from job postings and apartment listings in major cities generated healthy profits. By 2005, when newspapers were finally launching serious digital classified initiatives, Craigslist had expanded to over 100 cities and established such dominant market positions that dislodging it would require resources and time that newspapers no longer possessed. The financial carnage Craigslist inflicted on newspapers was swift, merciless, and irreversible. Between 2000 and 2010, newspaper classified advertising revenue collapsed from $19.6 billion to just $4.6 billion, a 76% decline that represented the largest transfer of wealth from traditional media to digital platforms in history. But the raw numbers only tell part of the story. Classified ads weren't just revenue for newspapers. They were pure profit that subsidized expensive investigative journalism, foreign bureaus, and comprehensive local news coverage that made newspapers essential to democratic society. When Craigslist eliminated this profit center, it didn't just hurt newspaper balance sheets. It fundamentally undermined newspapers' ability to serve their public interest mission. Major metropolitan dailies that had employed hundreds of journalists were forced to conduct layoffs that would have been unthinkable just a decade earlier. The San Francisco Chronicle, operating in Craigslist's backyard, saw its classified revenue evaporate so completely that the paper nearly ceased publication in 2009. Smaller regional newspapers faced even worse devastation, with hundreds of papers closing permanently as their classified advertising revenue, often representing 50 to 60% of total income, simply vanished. Craigslist's victory became total through a business model that was almost perfectly designed to prevent newspaper competition. While traditional media companies were beholden to shareholders demanding quarterly growth and profit maximization, Craigslist remained privately held by Craig Newmark and CEO Jim Buckmaster, who steadfastly refused to maximize revenue through advertising, premium features, or expansion strategies that might compromise user experience. The company charged money only for job postings in major cities and apartment listings in New York, fees that generated an estimated $100 million annually, while keeping the platform accessible to regular users. This restraint wasn't just philosophical, it was strategic brilliance that newspapers couldn't replicate. Any newspaper-backed classified site needed to generate enough revenue to justify corporate investment and shareholder expectations, while Craigslist could operate indefinitely on a skeleton budget that made competition economically impossible. The platform's ugly design, which newspaper executives mocked relentlessly, actually served as a moat against competition. Users had trained themselves to navigate Craigslist's quirks, and any competitor offering similar functionality would need to overcome massive switching costs and network effects while somehow differentiating themselves from a free service that already worked perfectly well. The deeper tragedy of Craigslist's destruction of newspaper classified advertising was how it revealed the fundamental vulnerability of media business models that had seemed unshakable for generations. Newspapers had never really been in the news business. They were in the attention business, selling readers to advertisers while producing journalism as a means to that end. Classified advertising was particularly crucial because it represented local monopoly power that national publications couldn't replicate. giving regional newspapers pricing leverage that insulated them from broader market forces. When Craigslist eliminated this local advertising monopoly, it exposed newspapers to direct competition with every other media platform fighting for attention and advertising dollars. The timing couldn't have been worse, as Craigslist's classified disruption coincided with Google's dominance of search advertising and Facebook's emergence as the preferred platform for display advertising, creating a perfect storm that simultaneously eliminated newspapers' most profitable revenue streams while fragmenting their audience across digital platforms. Between 2005 and 2015, total daily newspaper circulation fell from 55 million to 35 million, while advertising revenue declined from $47 billion to just $16 billion. Numbers that represented not just business decline, but the collapse of an entire information ecosystem. What made Craigslist's industry kill shot so complete was how thoroughly it changed consumer expectations and behavior around classified advertising in ways that could never be reversed. Once people experienced the convenience of posting ads instantly, searching through unlimited listings, and communicating directly with buyers or sellers, returning to newspaper classifieds felt like traveling backward through time. Craigslist had essentially trained an entire generation of consumers to expect classified services to be free, immediate, and comprehensive, expectations that newspapers could never profitably meet given their cost structures and shareholder obligations. The platform's success also spawned dozens of specialized competitors that further fragmented the classified market, from Indeed and Monster for job listings to Zillow and Trulia for real estate, each targeting specific categories where they could provide even better user experiences than Craigslist's general-purpose approach. By 2010, classified advertising had evolved from a simple revenue stream into a complex digital ecosystem where newspapers were just one of many participants, and usually not the most effective one for either advertisers or users seeking classified services. Today, Craigslist continues operating much as it did in 2005, with the same deliberately outdated design, minimal staff, and philosophy of community service over profit maximization that originally made it so dangerous to newspapers. The platform processes over 80 billion page views annually across 700 cities worldwide, facilitating transactions worth an estimated $20 billion per year, while employing fewer than 50 people and maintaining the technological infrastructure that Craig Newmark built in his spare time 25 years ago. Meanwhile, the newspaper industry that Craigslist helped destroy has never recovered, with daily circulation continuing to decline, newsroom employment at its lowest levels since the 1940s, and hundreds of communities across America becoming news deserts with no dedicated local journalism coverage. The ultimate irony of Craigslist's victory is that it was never intended as an attack on newspapers or traditional media. Craig Newmark has repeatedly expressed regret about journalism's decline and has donated millions of dollars to support nonprofit news organizations. But intentions matter less than consequences, and the consequences of one programmer's attempt to help his local community connect more effectively was the systematic destruction of the business model that had supported American journalism for over a century, proving that in the digital age, the most devastating disruptions often come not from ambitious competitors, but from simple solutions that solve old problems in fundamentally better ways.